You know what I don't see? You never really get a planet where it's not fully terraformed, but it's on its way. Like we can currently sort of reduce the mass of the atmosphere of Venus by like a third, using experimental terraforming technology. But the problem is, if you introduce the terraforming things, the biological terraforming things, into the Venetian atmosphere, it would decrease by only about a third, and people think, well, it's gonna die off because it can't maintain itself. But it's a big-ass atmosphere, so my take is, if you use a biological solution to terraforming the atmosphere on Venus, right, it wouldn't really just die off. Like, the biological material wouldn't die off because it's a big ass atmosphere, right? There's this whole ring of environment between the hot part and the cold part, and it's a very slow moving planet. So there would be a kind of halo of biological material remaining on Venus if you tried and failed to partially terraform it, and you would have cycles of resurgence of biological material, rebioforming. It's called bioforming when you're not really focusing on converting the atmosphere to be more like Earth. And that would lower the density of the atmosphere. So instead of 10 kilometers up, what's human breathable or human survivable would be like 4 to 6 kilometers up above the surface. Now, if you do that, you have a much easier time setting up little bubble habitats, right, on the surface, and just suspending something in the air, like a floating city. Not necessarily a floating city, but like this outpost, this balloon that's suspended from the Earth. And once you have that, and you have this little tiny atmospheric elevator, right, going up and down the wire, you can move stuff from the surface to the top, and stuff from the top to the surface. You can guide it down to the surface with a parachute, because you have a clear line that your drone can focus on. Right. So once you have access to the surface of Venus, and the atmosphere isn't quite as dense, and it's easier to work with your balloon habitat, blah, 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 you can start focusing on manufacturing reflective equipment and other stuff. And my take is, the way to terraform Venus isn't biological or with a bajillion comments. The way to terraform Venus is setting up a few bubble cities on Venus's main continent, making a bunch of underground cities on Venus's continent, right? And using that installation to mass manufacture reflective material, reflective little kites on Venus. And instead of like wasting your life trying to figure out how to set up a reflective sheet near the sun, it just makes more sense to just use resources on Venus to set up a reflective floating layer of kites, because they're cheap to produce, they're easy to produce, and they're in atmosphere, so they can be recycled. Once you have those reflective sheets, the carbon in the atmosphere will gradually liquefy, and that is the closest thing to a full terraformation of Venus that you can get, right? And once you have a more Earth-like atmosphere, people can start moving in, and people can start mining more stuff so that you can chemically combine the carbon in the atmosphere with stuff, with certain rocks, and blah, blah, blah. Like, there's no actual need to bombard the atmosphere with comets when you could just manufacture your explosive on the ground and blow stuff up on the ground, right? You have the material right there. a lot of people don't notice, but it's actually more expensive per yield to make a nuclear warhead than it is to just use regular explosives, right? So a ton of TNT is a lot less expensive than the equivalent of 1 ton of TNT force from a nuclear warhead. And that's like the super powerful nuclear warheads that use hydrogen. The less powerful nuclear warheads, they're even more expensive. So there's not really a lot of point to doing that stuff when you just have solar powered driving vehicles going around. Like why travel 100,000 miles when you can just drive around a couple of miles, blow some stuff up, mine some stuff from the stuff that you blew up, mine more stuff, repeat, 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 repeat. And the materials, as you're doing that stuff, could be reused to manufacture more stuff on Venus's main continent. Right? So, yeah, there's just no need to overcomplicate things with comets. You can just build everything out of everything by partially terraforming, right? So, where's this story where people live on a floating city, but there's like a logical reason for living on a balloon city, right? Like early terraformation of Venus, and you have like a little line that you have to send stuff down on and get stuff up from. Like maybe you create balloons that get up to your habitat's altitude, and you pick up stuff. You then manufacture the stuff using your own little manufacturing factory in the air, and blah, 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 blah. Or maybe you just focus on releasing kites that are remote controlled kites, and you're focusing on releasing them and managing them as a swarm over a certain area. And that certain area being showed down allows for the cultivation of certain microorganisms that are going to help you out with something. Maybe you have like a few hundred balloon cities, right? And you're manufacturing a few thousand, like a narrow strip of reflective kites on Venus, right? And this narrow strip of reflective kites is providing cooling for a certain area as around the equator of the planet, and that area becomes your growing bed for plants, special plants that then get reused as building material or as chemical components in some other thing, and blah, 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 blah. There's so many ways to be creative without fully terraforming a planet. And you would just need your habitat in the air. Like a partially terraformed world seems a lot more interesting than a pre-terraformed or post-terraformed world, is what I'm saying. Like, it could be very, very interesting to start the story in the middle of a terraformation process. And maybe someone figures something out that vastly accelerates the schedule, or something like that. Maybe someone figures out a cybernetics technology where you create a factory on planet that shits out reflective kites in mass and makes a whole bunch more balloons. So suddenly you have this growth spurt in your technology, and people are struggling to keep up with their technology in the terraforming process, and there's shady things going on. Something like that.